In this sequel to The Anaconda, crew members have jumped ship from the Anaconda, an asteroid miner that mysteriously transported 400 years into the past. The year is 1801, and some of the future's best and brightest want to lead an army of aborigines and freed slaves against the European oppressors. Others prefer the more peaceful strategy to stem the inevitable yet catastrophic Industrial Revolution. Meanwhile, a team of twin assassins roams the planet in search of targets, and the artificial intelligence they all rely on is contaminated and becoming unreliable. A New Earth. The Anaconda, Book 2. Written by Richard Hanners. Narrated by Serena Hart. Hello, and welcome back to another audiobook review. This time for a book called A New Earth. Now, I just want to start by saying I do not normally do this. Anybody who's checked out this channel knows I don't normally start with a sequel to a book that I've never read. And I do this for very good reasons. Because if I was going to score this series, I can't give it an accurate score. Like, if I miss the first 20 minutes of a movie, I'm going to be lost for the rest of the movie. Or if I start a franchise, like Star Wars, for example. Well, I mean, that was made intentionally that way, but you didn't need to know the first 3 at the time to come in with Chapter 4. Or Episode 4. But anyways, my point is, I don't normally do this. So, I'm going to try to be fair as I can and not keep saying if I had read the first book, it might have improved this. So just generally, let me say right now, in any negative aspect I say, a good portion of it probably comes from if I had read the first book, or if I listened to the first book, it probably would have improved my experience of the second. But can the second, when people read the Guardian of Light series, you should always begin with book 1. You really should. Because that introduces you, that entire book is introducing you to just the main characters. The main character. Yeah, you meet some of the side characters. They get some time, he gets close to a few. But his best friend, for example, is hardly in it. Why? Because although the best friend is going to become a main character, he is not the main character. He is going to be right by his friend's side the rest of the series. There's a reason I paused there, but so you just need to know in the beginning, this is his best friend that he grew up with. And then he goes on to do his thing. Yes, the new friends he's making, the new alliances he's making are heavily forced upon in the first book. I start building those friendship, those ties with others in that first book. And in the second book too. But you kind of don't need to really have read the first book, like I said, although you should, to pick up book 2 and go, okay, I get what happened in book 1, because I do a very good job at explaining in general means what had happened in book 1, what brought this character to this point in book 2. I don't spend a lot of time on it. I don't dive deep into the history of book 1. It's just a recall. A quick, easy recall that is very clear and very simple, that spells out throughout the first few chapters everything that happened. So, before I jump into this review, let me just start by saying, if I had read the first book, I would probably have enjoyed book 2 much more. But if you are a fan of sci-fi and you are a fan of alternate history, this is definitely a book you might want to check out. So, with that said, let's jump right into book 2 of the Anaconda series, the cover and title. Now, starting with the cover and title, I'm going to give this 3 stars. A New Earth is clear on the cover. The writer's name is clear on the cover. I'm okay with A New Earth as the subtitle, but if I had read the no, not gonna say it. I'm just not entirely happy. Like, I know it's not my place to say, oh, well, it should be called this or it should have been called that. I just don't find that the main title being the Anaconda coming across as a meaningful title. First off, I think it's about snakes, so I probably wouldn't read it. And the picture, although it's okay. I mean, maybe somebody will like it. I mean, I was almost at the point of giving this a 2 when I saw the paperback version's cover, which was a little bit worse. I definitely think the author should consider maybe reaching out to somebody to help with the cover and maybe even the title. I mean, like I said, he could keep the title A New Earth. But I think there is a much better title out there that he could have come up with than the Anaconda. But that's just my personal opinion. It doesn't sound sci-fi. It doesn't strike me as historical. It would have been better if it had something going for it that just screamed sci-fi. Like I said, the picture is okay. The paperback, I shouldn't even say paperback, the Kindle version is much worse. I definitely think it needs to be rebranded. I think it needs to be redone. But that's just my personal opinion. If he's happy with it, if he thinks this is, the best, by all means, go for it. So with that said, now moving on to the narration. And I have to commend this author. So for narration, I'm actually going to give him 5 stars because the narrator he picked that he worked with was great. I loved her delivery of the entire book, and I can understand how this book should be so hard because I would have had trouble reading some of these, I would have had a lot of trouble reading some of these names, and she just read it like a champ. So I have to commend her on her ability because that takes skill. I mean, there was maybe 1 or 2 names she might have said a little differently than I would have said it, but a lot of the names in this book are very hard to pronounce names. And she just powered through it, And I swear I've heard her voice somewhere before. So Serena Hart definitely deserves the 5 stars. And Richard did a great job hiring a really good narrator. Now moving on to the writing. And for the writing, I'm actually going to also give Richard 5 stars here too. Because a lot of the words he used, although they are very difficult to probably say, I can't imagine they are any easier to write. And he did have to probably do a lot of research to understand the different ways different people react around the world, the way different people communicate. I do think he took liberties, but that is kind of the point. Because this is like alternative history. This is not actual history, although there are actual history examples or things talked about, which means he did his research of the time. So I have to commend that he did do such a good job doing his research, doing his writing all those difficult names, and I'll get to that in the next section, but yeah, so he definitely earned 5 stars here. Now moving on to the story. And for the story, at least for this book, or only this book, I have to give this 3 stars. I did enjoy the story very much. I enjoyed hearing what these people were going through. But, based on what I read, which I always read the description of the book after I finish to compare what I heard to what was written. And the reason I do this is because I don't want to go in knowing everything about your book. I don't want to go in knowing everything that's going to happen. Especially when I'm coming in the second book. That way I can treat it as its own story. So, basically, the story was very good. I liked a lot of the, plot details that the author had going for it. And I said I wasn't going to say this very often, so I'm only going to say it this once, because it's kind of prevalent here. But there are times where they do talk about, I guess, events from the previous book, and I'm having trouble piecing those parts together. Like, they talk about it, but they don't talk about it. And because they aren't talking about it, I can't get a sense of, oh, I know this is a mining ship. I know something happened that sent them back 400 years in the past. But I don't know, like, the relationship of the crew. Who's the captain? Who's in charge? I mean, they talk about, different people having different jobs, or like cadets, you know, um, making these two assassins cadets or something. And it's just like, wait a minute. Should they be like security? I don't know the rank levels here. I don't know how this whole thing operated before being sent back in time. You know, and nobody was actually working on, like they just gave up. And I guess that must have happened in the previous one because, like I said, nobody's even trying to figure it out. Like, hey, we shouldn't, there wasn't any care. Well, I guess I'll get to that. I'll get to that later. But, some of the things, like I said, I'll bring up the characters. But, yeah. The other reason I give this 3 stars is because of the fact that while the story was very good and very compelling, and it actually did make me want to know more, and it kept me going, when I reached the end, it just kind of dropped. And what I meant by that is there was no climax. There was no like great buildup for any kind of battle, At the end of Empire Strikes Back, for example, it wouldn't have been as great if Luke didn't face Vader at all. If, Luke just went, oh, hey, good, I found you. Let's go. Get out of here. Oh, they got Han. Oh, we'll go get him. That wouldn't have been very compelling. It was that fight with Vader that really cranked it up. And I've talked about on this channel how I feel about that fight. But moving on, at the end of Harry Potter and the Secret of Chamber of Secrets, he fights the Basilisk. He's kind of fighting Voldemort, but not really. It's more him versus the snake. There is a big buildup. There is a big, even at the end of my books, there is a big buildup. There is a big battle. It's not the battle of battles, but each battle in each book gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Here, there wasn't. Not as far as I could tell. Yeah, there was some things happening, but it just seemed like there was a lot more putting everything as a setup for a future book or a future storyline rather than resolving anything here. I mean, yeah, characters went from point A to point B, but nobody ever reached the end and began a new journey. No journeys were really concluded. Nobody fought each other. Like, even there's this one point where these 2 assassins meet up with, I'm assuming is one of the main characters, and she just talks to them and they go away. It's like, okay, well, that was a little anticlimactic. There was no battle. At least would have been interesting if, like, maybe she killed one of them, but the other one nearly killed her, and she fell into the river, and somebody who she helped earlier found her and, was making her better. Like, one of the Indian women was actually patching her up. That would have been interesting to see. That would have been an interesting take to have some kind of climax. And this just, it felt like the story lacked a climax and just dropped off and said, to be continued. And no, most episodes don't even do that on TV. Usually you got some kind of big cliffhanger. And this really didn't have that big of a cliffhanger. So, now moving on to characters. And for characters, I'm going to say I'm giving this a 4. Once again, I mean, it's kind of playing into the story aspect, but your characters really didn't go anywhere. Yeah, they did things, they accomplished things, but everybody was basically still in the same spots almost as they were when they began. You know, you have this main girl who's helping out these Indians while she's supposed to be looking for these 2 guys, and she didn't even come to find the 2 guys. She just sidetracked and helped these Indians along the way build a bigger, camp, a better camp, and improve their lives. Great, that's wonderful, but wasn't her job to find these 2 guys, and she didn't even do that. These 2 guys, they're building an army, and they're still building the army as they're, done, as it's ending. It's like, so they didn't even finish building their army. They're on their way to do it. They're trying to do it. They're trying to unite all these tribes of Indians to be peaceful with each other so they could fight the British, but they didn't even finish accomplishing that. They're still working on it. You have the assassins who are looking for the bad guys, or these 2 guys. I don't even know who's good guys, who's bad guys. I don't know who the heroes are and who's the villains. I don't really know much of the characters' goals. But they are good characters, and I can follow them and learn about who they are. So they do have good characteristics. And I'm not saying I need to know every single little detail and aspect of these characters' lives. That could come over time. In book 1 of The Guardian of Light, Shane is becoming Santa Claus. That is his goal. That is his mission, to become a wizard and become the new Santa Claus. A wizard who is capable of defending the light of the world. In book 2, he quite clearly sets out to rescue Merlin, to bring Merlin back into the fight from his prison. He spends half the book doing that. And then once he has them, things are threatened by these 2 elementals. By the end of the book, he has to deal with these 2 elementals. It's non-optional. Book 3, they set out to find the sword Excalibur and bring it back to the North Pole. That is the mission. That is what they have to do by the end. Here, in this book, I didn't get a sense of what characters had to do, where they had to go. And those that I did understand didn't even finish what they were setting out to do. So that's where I feel like the characters fell short. So now moving on to extras. And unfortunately there are no extras. So let's just move on to the final verdict. And the final score for New Earth, the Anaconda Book 2, I'm going to have to give this a 5 out of 10. It could be maybe a 6 out of 10. like I said, if I had read the other one, maybe I'd understand things a little bit better, and it might have upped the story a little bit more, or it might have upped the characters a little bit more, knowing the way the socialism of the ship was before they separated, to know who was loyal, who's not loyal, what government they serve, and everything. But because I did not have that information, and it was never really readdressed in detail, I think really hurts the book. So if the author is listening, my suggestion, I understand this is your book, but definitely consider rebranding the series. Maybe give, instead of the Anaconda, you know, or maybe try something along the lines, if it's available, the Anaconda Chronicles, or Records of the Anaconda, something along that line. I'm sure there are plenty of, Facebook groups that are willing to help you. I'm sure if you reach out to some people on Facebook, you can maybe even get some help with getting a new cover for at least this one. Some of the others are a little bit of an improvement, because I did check out some of the other covers before I start talking about it. So I definitely feel like this series has the room to improve. And if the author does do anything, I think maybe adding in basically a previously on, since he's not addressing those, because story-wise, you didn't really need to address a whole lot of details of what happened in the previous book. But in my case, in this one instance, this is a time where maybe a previously on chapter would have been nice at the beginning. So, that's my thoughts on A New Earth, Anaconda Book 2. I hope this review has been helpful. I hope that I get to, at some point, hear the entire series. And I might even go back and change this, score. If, like I said, I did enjoy the story. It's just those things that I pointed out, not knowing certain things. So, like I said, I enjoyed it. Check it out for yourself on Amazon or Audible. And I will talk to you all next time.